I always had a passion for art, like going back to middle school even. But I also had like this kind of math inclination towards high school. And I remember like my senior year in high school, I was taking calculus, and I said, wow, this kind of sucks. I wasn't doing that good at it, so I was like, I'll do art. And that's what led me to art school. And so I was doing the art path for, the first half of my career, basically. And that was super fun, but I always had this kind of tech inclination with the math background. And a lot of the games I was working on were kind of like open world, so you couldn't efficiently just manually paint things. There wasn't enough manpower, and there definitely wasn't enough horsepower. So you had to find creative ways to populate the world. And that's what led me down the kind of technical path. And that's what kind of brought me here. It's a rare, I guess, combination, because there's a lot of satisfaction coming from just the art aspect, just make things beautiful, make it pretty as possible with no technical hurdles. And then there's the problem-solving side of the programming aspect, which is, it's fun but painful mentally, But there's a lot of reward at the end, and I think I think Japanese games are really good at doing that. They have a perfect blend of artistic and technical prowess, and it shows really well. So that's what I appreciate about technical art and visual effects. And also, it's not too common, You can see some amazing hard modeling stuff, like ZBrush, characters, environments, beautiful stuff. But atmospheres and effects and fire, they're a lot trickier. So it's a fun challenge. It's very satisfying. I mean, my prior positions before Double Fine were very environment-based. So effects were kind of like, they weren't a priority. There was never a dedicated person for effects. It was almost like UI in a sense. It was like we'll get to it later kind of stuff. But coming here, it was prioritized, and there was a dedicated role for it, so you could kind of get into the position and just make things beautiful. A lot of it is the technical realities of it. In film, you just do an offline render and make it as beautiful as possible, but with real-time graphics, there are some strict limitations, just fill rate and just the tools behind it. And also just the people involved, different skill sets, different art styles. Even here, all our games are very diverse in their art style. So, coming from Costume Quest 2 to Massive Chalice, they're completely different. And so it takes them a while to ramp up, but it's also a good exercise in just brainstorming and style. Yeah, I think a lot of it's just getting lost in the game, like playing it for a bit. Luckily, VFX, it can come towards the end, so a lot of the concept art's done, a lot of the environments are done, a lot of the game is really there. So when I first get on a project, it's playing it for an hour a day and just getting in that world. And then it might be studying some styles of similar things, seeing what the concept art was, and getting inspired that way. Because there's only so many ways you can make just a realistic, fire or explosion. So it's fun for Massive Chalice, for example. It's very stylized, very faceted look. So that represents a challenge when it comes to softer, like smoke effects. With the geometry, it's easy, just facet everything, but with fire and smoke, it's totally different. That's a challenge, it turns out, but it's an exciting challenge. It's been good. It's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of iteration, which is, because it's very collaborative here, so, we'll do some rough things at first. When I was first on the project, we did some experimental effects and went back and forth with Brad and the art director, and it was very communal, I guess, and that's kind of how it is. It feels like generally they defer to me when it comes to making an effect, but I'll present it to them and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? And they might draw over it or give some feedback. So it's super helpful in that regard. I wouldn't want to work in just a closed bubble anyway, because the best work doesn't come out that way. So.
Was there anyone on the tech side that you got to work with, like?
Matt Enright,
yeah.
Fucking genius, and David Farrell, obviously,
yeah.
Genius also. So those two guys are really the core tech team here. Yeah, and even with them, it's collaborative on a tech sense. I might prototype an idea in a separate package and show it to them, and they might say, oh, we can do this way, and they'll present something to me, and then I'll work with their tool set, and we just go back and forth like that. And ultimately, it's at a point where they just hand it off, like they don't need to have any more technical work done on it, so they give it to me as the artist, just prettied up, I suppose. But again, that goes back to the whole collaborative sense here, which is super helpful, because it's almost like different languages, you know, artists speak and the programmer. So if there's an effect that Derek wants in, he knows that it as like a 2D brushstroke. And David Farrell and Matt know it as like bits and numbers and arrays and things like that. And I speak both their languages very poorly, so I can get it across, I can combine the two. So it does feel good in a sense to be an interpreter for the two. Yeah. And from a satisfaction sense, it feels rewarding just seeing something happen that I haven't put together, you know. Douglas is our main interface for making effects in the game. So like this fire, for example, a lot of the controls for it reside in Douglas in these particle systems, like the flame. Check out. Kind of hot reload it and see the effects real time, which is nice. And this is just a huge. All these files are just huge and unwieldy and super fun to work with. I say that half sarcastically because they are fun. There's a lot of things to play with in here, and you can get all kinds of different looks from these values. Tiny little flames, little embers, or you can make them super long-lasting. So you can get all kinds of different looks. Yeah, Douglas is our internal editor for everything Brutal Engine related. But a lot of this language is common to effects artists. You know, like the difference between Max and Maya is just details. The concepts are the same. So, you know, most particle editors have the same kind of concepts: velocity, size over life. So this is our way of creating them, of working with them. Yeah, we have like curl noise, which is making it look a little more natural. Otherwise, it would just be, you know, flowing one direction all the time. Like if I shut that down, that's how it looks normally. And so sometimes you'll want that effect for like a wind blowing across the environment. But it helps add some noise to it. Not that much, but yeah, just to break it up. Yeah, and that's the fun side of making effects, is once you're familiar with all the tools, you can kind of go artistic with it and make it look as it should. But it's definitely intimidating at first, all these. I mean, it's not, aside from the curves, there's nothing too artist-friendly about this. Yeah, again, a lot of the values here are core or common particle system values. So for effects artists, it's second nature. And a lot of these vary, you know, unlike, say, Max or Maya, which are standard, industry standard. You know, a lot of particle systems are very proprietary, like per studio. So some are more powerful than others, but you know, after a couple weeks, you pick it up. It's, I mean, since a lot of these concepts I said are very common, so you can find them in most packages that have them. Like Unity has a particle editor, that's an easy one to get started with. Unreal has one too. And so once you kind of master those, the skill set translates into ours. And we may have more features or fewer features depending on what it is. That's the advantage of having our own engine, is we can, if we have time, we can implement that feature, you know, whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, really the only traditional artistic element here is the texture, which is super basic. It's just this little thing, this shard, and then a lot of the for fire especially, you know, having glow is huge. You know, it starts as just a basic little shard, but I'm gonna make it 100% like super basic right here. Kind of build this up from scratch. So it quickly can go from something really rudimentary to something a little more complex, just by changing those, those core simple values, speed over life, transparency over life, just random noise. Yeah, so for more solid things like the fire, it's easier, but the smoke is a tough one because, they're hexagons. Like it's not as satisfying as something that's more solid, like a flame. Oh shoot, that's not correct. But that was an accident, right? But you can see how it can change to something a little more magical. So many times I'll just get it in a really crude sense, and then play the game for a week or so, and then rethink it, see if it needs work even. And sometimes for some effects, they're so secondary, it's good enough, Like, you could look at this whole scene and say, what doesn't work here? And some things may not matter, like the fireflies. I could spend hours on that, but it's not worth it. But for a lot of the gameplay effects, like the arrow impacts and explosions, those need some time. The water was a result of a lot of post-production work. So I had time to play with it and experiment. Same with the fire. But at some point, you have to take into account how often you'll see that thing versus how much time you need to spend on it, how much Kickstarter funding you have, those kind of questions. And it's like, it's like Stockholm Syndrome. You just get used to it and you start to like it after a while. You memorize the values you want, and then you just plug them in. And most of the time it's good enough, This slight color of green is not exactly what I want, but you play with it. Luckily it hot reloads, so it's worst case, you can trial and error your way to what you want. Yeah, it's funny, for the fire, it's, or for the explosion, it's almost all the same. It's still using that one texture, getting a lot of use out of that, the same smoke texture. So the assets themselves are pretty basic, but you get a lot of variety out of the behavior. An explosion is much more violent than, say, this little fire, so the changes are in the effect file itself. I mean, all these values and all these layers of different systems make for a much more complex effect. Priority is making the stuff that's gameplay specific, like the effect, like the impact effects or battle effects. But for scenes like this, it's to bring it to life. There's some other, I don't know if I have them here, but even the keeps. Like, there's not much you can do here, but some lighting, some background dust, anything to kind of bring it to life. Another example is I have to, when you build things, build a keep, confirm. So we've got this scaffolding effect that goes up, but it's just a static mesh, there's no, so I'm tasked to add some dust to it and make it look like it's actually under construction. And that's like, it's definitely a vague task intentionally. That's up to me to figure out what that's going to look like based on some of Brad's direction. But I think at this point, those kind of things are more polishy. That's the kind of thing where if you have time, you're playing the game and you want to add some art to it, you can do that. But for me, the priority is the battle stuff right now. Yeah, I mean, for this, I guess for this field in particular, it's definitely getting out of your comfort zone. Because I guess, as an example, my background is more artistic, so I liked seeing the results immediately. But I found as soon as I kind of stepped out of that comfort zone and tried to, mess with this text editor, for example, right? Like, it's not comfortable at first, but once you see results, things kind of click and it makes sense. So definitely, for effects in particular, try some new things you're not familiar with. If you're stronger in art, try getting into the programming side. If you're stronger in programming, just try to speak the artist's language and get to know how they do things and basic art concepts. Because this effects is very kind of cross-discipline. You have to know a little bit of everything. you don't have to be a master of it, but you should know a lot of it. So at least you can speak the language. Because being an effects artist, it's also being like an intermediate between the artist and the programmer. So speaking both languages is super helpful. And experiment. It's not just master. It's not like mastering Unreal, for example, or mastering one package. It's mastering the concepts so you can translate that to what you do. With R, like Douglas, for example, right? It's very custom, but once you know the fundamentals, it's easy to pick it up. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else people should know. Follow your dreams.